we begin in China, where Beijing has deployed more security forces to clamp down on demonstrations against its zero-COVID policy. But with infection numbers still high across the country, some cities have returned to a daily routine of mass testing. In Shanghai, police have also been patrolling the streets after the weekend's protests and are even checking mobile phones for messaging apps that were used to organize the gatherings. It's been a rare sign of dissent in China, with crowds rallying in Beijing, Shanghai, and even outside Chinese embassies around the world.
After a weekend of public unrest and anger, more protests at China's zero-COVID policy. But this is not Beijing or Shanghai. This small gathering is taking place in Hong Kong's business district. At its heart, a vigil to remember those who lost their lives in a building fire last week in the city of Urumqi. 10 deaths, it's alleged, that were caused by China's strict COVID measures and that have sparked this wave of demonstrations. Just like in cities across the Chinese mainland, here they hold up blank sheets of paper, now a symbol of dissent in this growing movement, all under the watchful eyes of the authorities.
The situation in China has gotten worse and worse over the past few years. People's basic demands are ignored. We still work hard. We just want to live like humans.
Hong Kongers have been suffering from this regime for so many years. Therefore, we share the same feelings. We in mainland Chinese are facing the same problem. I think it matters to Hong Kong and even the world.
On a Hong Kong university campus, they sing a hit from the musical Les Miserables, an unofficial anthem of previous anti-government protests here in Hong Kong that's now part of this uprising that's spreading across the world. Like here in Tokyo, outside the Chinese embassy. And in London, where concerns over Beijing's crackdown on protesters has sparked this response from the UK Foreign Secretary.
Well, protests against the Chinese government are rare. And when they do happen, I think the world should take notice, but I think the Chinese government should take notice. It's clear that the Chinese people themselves are deeply unhappy with what is going on, about the restrictions imposed upon them by the Chinese government.
China's foreign minister has defended the country's COVID restrictions, but on the streets, tensions are running high. There's a heavy police presence in cities including Shanghai, with authorities quick to make arrests. They do not want a repeat of what happened over the weekend, but the world is now watching.
Well, journalist Fabian Kretschmer joins us from Beijing now. Fabian, fewer images of protests have made it out of China in the last 24 hours. Are the demonstrations dying down, or are we looking at a Chinese suppression campaign of these images?
Well, yeah, the protests are on pause right now, but I mean, that's because of a really state-led repression campaign. So here in Beijing, we have a high presence of police, not only of the protest side near the embassy area, but also there were rumors yesterday night that the protesters would gather in another district in the northwest. And as soon as the first correspondents arrived, there were like lots of police, both in plainclothes and in uniform, and everyone who just stood by or looked curious was immediately approached by policemen. So it's literally impossible to gather in that environment. And in Shanghai, the police even went one step further. They were stopping a lot of passerbys and checked their phones and deleted critical photos, and also checked whether they would use Instagram or Twitter foreign apps, and also asked them to delete those apps.
Now, some COVID rules have been eased since these protests began. Is that a sign that China is yielding to some demands of the demonstrators?
Well, a small sign. Actually, today, further adjustments and openings of the COVID policy are expected as the State Council announced a press conference. But I'm expecting, small steps towards, changing and adjusting the zero COVID policy that meets some of the demands of the protesters. But I'm emphasizing here only some demands.
Now, are these protests only about COVID restrictions, or is there deeper dissent?
Yeah, I think really it's a diverse crowd that went to those protests. For some, it's really just getting out of lockdowns and stopping those unpredictable and unscientific lockdowns. Others say those zero COVID policy is a manifestation of the lack of rule of law that we have in China, and they are demanding more legal protection. And then there's also quite a significant crowd who demands political change, who basically is not happy with the leadership and specifically with Xi Jinping. So there's not really a consensus of how far the demonstration will go, but it's really a mixed bag, so to speak.
So how much of a threat are these demonstrations then for Xi Jinping's grip on power?
Well, at this point, I would say it's not a very severe threat because, as we could see just yesterday, the state has so much, resources to mobilize and so many tools of repression and, of course, intimidation. There's a lot of fear going on also that, the state might use big data to search for who organized the protests and, track them down. And, of course, then put them into prison. And then also I think the critical mass has not been reached. So right now, most of the protesters are actually young people, students, and in general, young people. If, for example, blue-collar workers would also join in those protests, then the picture would be quite different. But so far, I would say it's not a grave threat to Xi Jinping's grip on power.
Fabian Kretschmer there for us. Thank you very much, Fabian.